Hello, everybody. Welcome to Minnesota Made, Growing the Bioeconomy. I'm Valerie Forbes, Dean of the College of Biological Sciences at the University of Minnesota. Thank you for joining us for what promises to be an enlightening conversation. The College of Biological Sciences is one of the only colleges in the country dedicated entirely to the biological sciences. Consequently, we're able to bring together a critical mass of researchers who play a central role in doing the basic research needed to drive biological innovations. The university's Biotechnology Institute has long played a role in fostering the kinds of collaborations and supporting efforts to translate basic biological research into a wide range of applications, from cleaning up the environment to developing new treatments for disease. BTI has been around for more than 4 decades, which gives you a sense of the university's deep roots in biotechnology. Being able to bring the breadth and depth of the biological sciences to the table within the context of one of the top research universities in the country is a huge advantage when it comes to bringing together the people, infrastructure, and resources needed to do this work. As we all know, insights aren't enough. Partnering with industry is key to fully realizing our potential to build the bioeconomy in Minnesota and beyond. One way we hope to do that going forward is through the expansion of our Biotechnology Resource Center. The BRC, as we call it, is a pilot-scale biomanufacturing plant that provides state-of-the-art microbial cell and recombinant protein production and process development services. It's been in existence for over 35 years and serves a wide range of industry clients. To meet a growing demand for its services, the BRC will move into a new biomanufacturing innovation center on the St. Paul campus in fall 2023. We hope you'll all join us then to celebrate when the time comes. The new building is part of a broader effort to grow the biotech footprint on campus. If you'd like to receive more information and updates, please do let us know. And with that, I'll hand things over to Michael Oakes, Interim Vice President for Research. Michael.
Thank you, Dean Forbes. Thank you so much. Good, everyone. Really excited to be here on behalf of President Joan Gable and all the senior administrators. I just want to emphasize for a minute that the bioeconomy in all that we're talking about today and beyond is just super important to our university, to the region, and I'm going to say the world. This university, University of Minnesota, with all of your work, is uniquely positioned to have a massive impact and be responsive to the public's needs and industry need and so forth. As Dean Forbes alluded to, I have the privilege of helping lead a amazing research university, top 10 in terms of all kinds of good metrics. And in this effort, I get to cheerlead and sometimes incentivize and nudge researchers. And part of that is me working with Dean Forbes and so many of you to really grow this initiative at the university. The College of Biological Science is unique, but this university has so many other areas to partner with, to contribute with. And that's medicine, vet medicine, law, policy, public health, and beyond. And of course, expertise in all kinds of things like genomics and so many other nomics, computational biology, sustainable chemistry, material science, and of course, supercomputing. The BTI and others are already using microbes. We're well on our way. And now we're really poised to elevate our game, if you will, to go further, faster, and farther and have even more impact. We do so much wonderful interdisciplinary work, but from my seat, that's not sufficient. Interdisciplinarity has been talked about for, well, 20 years now. I think now we want to be the point of impact, driving the impact of great research universities in the public and all that that means. And so innovation impact is really where the current action is. To this idea, I just note quickly that the impact of this great university has had during the pandemic has been so important. As we think about the bioeconomy and what I like to tease Dean Forbes about bio stuff, is that McKinsey Institute values this effort at $4 trillion in the next 10 to 20 years. And University of Minnesota is going to be a key oar in that water through all of your work and all the connections that we have and the investments we're making. President Gabel, my boss, has made it a priority to renew and refresh our efforts working with industry. We have a new corporate engagement center we're opening up and all kinds of new structures in my office, the Office of the Vice President for Research, to assist in this area. The Biotechnology Research Center, the expansion that Dean Forbes mentioned, is part of this effort, part of the collective success, and part of sort of a joint effort across the institution, and if I might, the ecology in this area and beyond. The moderator for this conversation is my colleague, Lisa Biesman, and she's been helping with these efforts in the Office of Technology Commercialization in the office that I get to lead. And I'm super excited to be part of this, really excited for the work you're doing. And just please know that from the highest levels of our great university, this initiative is supported, desired, and we're really fortunate to have you and all of your involvement in this. Lisa, please take it away.
Thank you, Dean Forbes and Vice President Oakes. I'm Lisa Biesman, Senior Manager of Technology Commercialization in the Office of Vice President for Research here at the University of Minnesota. I'm really excited to facilitate today's discussion. We've got a great group of both industry and university experts here to share their insights about the bioeconomy in Minnesota and beyond. The bioeconomy is, needless to say, a huge topic. I did a bunch of research in preparing for this particular webinar and came across more definitions and distinctions around bioeconomy than I could decipher. So it definitely encompasses a wide range of activities, services, and ultimately products. As you've just heard, the university is a catalyst for innovation because of its expertise in biology, our connections to the state's corporate leaders, and investments in the biotechnology infrastructure, research, and training. So today we're going to talk about where things stand now, where they are headed, and what it will take to get there. As we get started with the introductions, feel free to post any questions you have for the panel in the Q&A feature of the Zoom webinar. We'll do our best to get to as many of those questions as we can, and I'm looking forward to a really fruitful discussion. Now I'd like to invite our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and provide some background on their connection to the bioeconomy. We're going to get started with Pamela Contag, CEO and President of BioEclipse Therapeutics. Pam, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation. This is really exciting for me. I'm at my home office in California, by the way. And my connection with the university started in about 1982. I grew up in Minneapolis, and I joined the Department of Microbiology and Immunology in 1982. And after my coursework, I joined Palmer Rogers Laboratory, and I thought that my path forward was studying infectious diseases and antibiotics, and it turned out I studied biofuels instead. And that was at a really interesting time when the Department of Energy had really pointed out interesting future predictions about our renewable fuels. And then I left the University of Minnesota, and after I got my PhD, and I went to Stanford University to do a postdoc. And there again, I started out in healthcare doing, essentially studying infectious diseases and immunology. And from there, I left my postdoc after 3 years and started my first company with technology out of Stanford that I had invented. And since then, I've done Xenogen Technology, a company I took public, which is a healthcare drug development platform. Second company was Cobalt Technologies, where I developed a process for making biofuels, ethanol and butanol. And now I'm CEO of BioEclipse Therapeutics, and I'm doing a phase 1 clinical trial with an immuno-oncology therapeutic. Thanks, great to be here.
Thank you. Next up, Mike Sadowski, Director of the University of Minnesota's Biotechnology Institute and Distinguished McKnight University Professor, will introduce himself.
Thank you, Lisa. It's an honor to be here today. As you heard from Dean Forbes, The university's Biotechnology Institute has a long and rich history at the university, and it was created some 38 years ago by deans in the College of Biological Sciences, as well as what's referred to now as the College of Science and Engineering, noting that these both scientists and engineers are needed to solve some of the problems in biotechnology. The Biotechnology Institute has a mission that includes providing research and professional training in biotechnology, support for university interactions with industry in biotechnology, and serve as a hub for microbial manufacturing and bioprocessing services. Our faculty have broad expertise in microbiology, biochemistry, biocatalysis, bioremediation, and synthetic biology. And our faculty bring together this expertise to expand knowledge in new and developing fields of commercially relevant life sciences and finding new applications for existing technology. As mentioned by Dean Forbes, our state-of-the-art Biotechnology Resource Center will be moving to a roughly 30,000 square foot biomanufacturing innovation center in fall 2023. Here, we will be able to enhance our ability to provide industry and university clients with high quality, pilot scale microbial manufacturing and downstream processing. This facility is at the forefront of moving biotechnology projects from the idea stage to testing products for efficacy under real life conditions. Our clients come from agricultural, biofuels, human therapeutics, industrial, and the veterinary sectors. And in a typical year, we perform a large number of runs for both university and industry clients, which will greatly expand. And for me, the term biotechnology and bioeconomy are very broad. And when I speak of bioeconomy, I refer to the activities relating to the invention, the development, production, and eventual use of either biological products or biological processes. And to me, the future of the bioeconomy in the US is very bright, as well as here at the University of Minnesota. And this will be enhanced by the development of new technologies, allowing efficient microbial production of new materials and products, more pilot and mid-scale production facilities, by having students training in microbial cell production and physiology, which will lead to enhanced workforce development to provide manufacturers with the personnel they need. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks for that great introduction, Mike. And we're going to move on to our next panelist, Jill Zullo, Vice President, Biointermediates at Cargill. Jill, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great, thank you so much. Really excited to be here today and talk about this topic that is extremely near and dear to my heart. So as Lisa said, my title is leading up the biointermediates business for Cargill. So I'm a longtime Cargill person, and actually got my start, my foundation in my bachelor's degree actually with CBS. So again, the university very near and dear and connected. What we're trying to do in biointermediates is really bring forth a number of new renewable chemical intermediates that then are allowed to go to a wide variety of markets. We've done quite a bit of market back research and understand that there's biopolar need for renewable, lower carbon intensity materials in the packaging space, and certainly that one's very prevalent, right? Who hasn't seen a lot of the pictures of the piles of garbage in the ocean? Interesting enough is apparel is another one, with all the fast fashion that is truly challenging to that industry, and they're needing to make their supply chains more sustainable. Well, you have to enter into an intermediate that then gets either polymerized or further derivatized into interesting materials for apparel. And the other one that we also see is hygiene. So think about baby diapers or adult incontinent. That market is growing and is one where it all goes to a landfill, and most of the materials again come from a petro supply chain, so a big cost to a greenhouse gas emissions. So that's really what my team does, put together those teams in innovation, and then in the end, really build the facility at hopefully one of our biorefineries, which allow us then to connect actually the farmer into new materials out to the what, again, apparel and or packaging or hygiene or any other application. So really excited to be here and excited to talk about all the things in store for the bioeconomy.
Next, we'll move on to our final panelists. So Mike Szymanski is Associate Professor of Biochemistry, Molecular Biology, and Development. He's going to share a little bit about himself. And so just so everybody recognizes, we've got 2 panelists from industry and 2 panelists representing the academic world.
Thanks, Lisa. So as she said, I'm a faculty member in the biochemistry department and the Biotechnology Institute. I teach at the university. I have a research lab that uses modern genetic engineering methodologies to engineer microorganisms, plants, fish, insects. Several of the technologies from my lab have been commercialized or are being commercialized by startup companies. I'm also working as a deputy CTO for an organization called BioMade, which is a new national manufacturing innovation institute that's headquartered on the St. Paul campus of the University of Minnesota. And the goal of that institute is to help catalyze the bringing to market new bioproducts. So happy to be part of this discussion and to learn from all you guys as well.
All right, so we're going to jump into the discussion. So I alluded to this in my introduction. When you think about bioeconomy and biotechnology, and even when you do a Google search on those terms, you come up with lots of different definitions and ways to kind of scope what that is versus what it isn't. Mike Sadowski in his opening remarks told us that he sees it as the use of biological products or processes. I want to have the other panelists kind of talk about how you define the bioeconomy and what you see as the kinds of innovations that are in the pipeline in that space. So Jill, why don't we start with you?
Great, thank you. So at Cargill, we use the word bioindustrial to sort of focus on the market application. And we define it very broadly as anything non-food and non-feed. So in my business, I deal with the intermediates, as I talked about, that are focused on sort of 3 main industries. But we have an oleochem business, so really processing of whether it's soy or canola or other oils into materials, again, from things like transformer fluids to replace mineral oil, where it has a much higher safety profile because it has a higher flash point. And so it really, it goes from, transformer fluids to also applications in makeup. So we talk about it from also asphalt to lipstick. So there's no end, in my opinion, to the materials that we can derive from agricultural renewable feedstocks. We can use biological processing. We can use straight chemical catalysis. There's a lot of tools that we can throw at it. But for me, or for Cargill, even the definition really comes from an annually renewable crop that you can then convert into a value-added material, which either replaces directly, sort of one for one, such as a drop-in, chemical, or it has the same functionality, so it allows us to replace petrochemical. So that really then connects us. The important part of it is connecting the farmer all the way out through those supply chains. That's how I would define it.
Great. Pamela, did you want to put your definition of bioeconomy and biotechnology into the discussion? You're on mute.
In healthcare, we think a lot about bioprocesses, sustainability. And I find it interesting that the bioeconomy or the biotechonomy was a word coined by geneticists. They were molecular geneticists that really envisioned the future manipulation of the genome, not just as a model for biology, which is critically, fundamentally important for all of us, is to keep understanding different models for biology, but as a production factory for materials. So why waste non-renewable resources and essentially deplete our earthly home if renewable process can replace most products? And so to me, the bioeconomy is that one notion of bioprocessing to product, but then it further invokes this broad and global issue of sustainability and renewability or reusability of materials. And what's already in the pipeline and what we can look forward to, we already have technology for affordable and renewable materials. We have great technology for the way we combat disease, support, a healthy society. I think that the biggest innovations coming are going to be in new materials, distribution, and price and cost synergies to make it all happen.
And Mike Szymanski, your take on bioeconomy.
Sure. Lisa, I think, one way to define a word is to state what it is, and other is to state what it's not. And I think that bioeconomy was created as a word to differentiate it from what the status quo was, which was a petrochemical based economy. So there's two parts to that. And the previous panelists commented on the fact that producing the molecules that we currently procure from petrochemicals is one definition of bioeconomy, making the molecules in a more sustainable way. But interestingly, there's a lot of uses that our society has for chemicals that we could start replacing with living, smarter applications. So replacing chemical therapeutics with gene therapies or cell-based therapeutics, replacing chemical pesticides with living pesticides that may have better outcomes in terms of their environmental friendliness and targets on off or impacts on off-target species, things like that. So it's both a new way we're making chemicals and a way that we're replacing chemicals with living technologies.
So Mike Sadowski, I already stole your definition of bioeconomy that you gave in your introductions. So thinking about the second half of my question, what kinds of innovations do you see in the pipeline related to biotechnology and bioeconomy? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. So one of the ideas, which I'm borrowing from several of the panelists, is the idea of sustainability. And this is really important in our current economy and as the world moves forward in the development and use of materials. And as I mentioned in my definition, not only is it the use of these materials, whether it's for agricultural, pharmaceutical, veterinary, or other uses, but it also encompasses the invention, development, and the production of these molecules. And one of the points that I wanted to make was that while a lot of these ideas that people have on making new molecules or new materials for human use seem very good on paper, they don't often work out that way. So there's a lot of development that needs to be done as we move materials from the concept stage in the laboratory to the production stage of actually trying these materials under real life conditions.
Thanks. So it's been suggested that the bioeconomy in the United States could be worth $4 trillion a year in the near future. Give us a sense of the current landscape globally, nationally, and locally. What do you think Minnesota's strengths are within the broader bioeconomy? And I'm open to whoever would like to chime in on this one first.
I wouldn't mind.
Go ahead, Pam.
So one of the things that I find really interesting from my specific industry is the trends that I have to look at from investors. They're called megatrends. And Colliers Capital did this study that really stands out in my mind, and it surprised me. Number one ranked investment over the next many years is going to relate to climate change and sustainability, followed by health and then biotechnology. So we already have huge economic gain and future potential for the combination of life sciences research and the vision that will benefit from this research. And what I see, what I really love about what University of Minnesota is doing now is that we usually, start developing these bioeconomy priorities in a crisis. And Minnesota has a lot of strengths, apart from the university and apart from their amazing industry. And you have so many Fortune 500 companies that can, utilize the bioeconomy, but also bring to bear some of the investing in the bioeconomy. And you have, I mean, I think Jill said it all, and the rundown on what the university can bring to the party is really, really important. Agriculture on potent soil and marginal soil, so you can have both food and biomass. The major sciences in biology, medicine, chemistry, engineering, computer, they're all in one spot at the university. And I think that what we have to remember, though, is this bioeconomy will be driven by state policy and US policy. And so I think what we have to do is start to define how we get all this funded.
That's a great point, and I might just jump in here. So when I think about what's the landscape or what comes, I do think about Europe first, and again, it's because my areas are typically non-pharma, right, non-healthcare, and really in that industrial application. They have really driven some great innovations ahead of that. I would say ahead of the US, simply because of their general dislike, I think, or acceptance, maybe that's a little better, of genetically modified organisms. So they were parsing and being more particulate, and I would say from a consumer, from a customer, from a brand owner perspective. They then jumped on that as climate change, right? Europe being one of the first to sort of, I don't know if we want to say recognize, but sort of embrace taking some level of actions. Sorry, I need to cancel that. We need to brace, or Europe braced taking some level of action against climate change. And so really interesting then how some of the companies sort of followed that. What was interesting, though, is some of the policies that they have set out have been fairly aggressive. And to the actual impact of stifling innovation. And one example is sort of this complete ban of single-use plastics, regardless of whether it was sort of degradable or compostable or whatever. So you had to fit sort of this strong definition of you only use it once, you can't, that won't happen in Europe. Well, since then they've changed and migrated and put that through, but it kind of goes to is, okay, now as the US is following, how do we become really smart about our policies? And how do we be, really smart about linking innovation drivers, opening up access, and really supporting the innovation? We have seen it through companies, through their own private investors. One of the top requirements now is a strong ESG program. So a lot of the brand owners that we work with, whether it's on the apparel side or on a packaging side, they really are looking at their supply chains and how do they start to make a sizable, real difference in the total life cycle analysis, or LCA, or carbon intensity of that value chain. So that is, again, to me, really hopeful. And what I hope is that we do get some of the policies to come, but they're smart. They're a little bit smarter than stifling innovation, but actually embracing and adding to. And I'll add just one more part on the importance of carbon capture and carbon economy in all of this, because that's sort of a way we have to figure out. We know that some of these technologies, especially early on, are not going to be as cost effective as a refined oil machine, right? They have really optimized costs over decades. We're going in with some new technologies. Capital is pretty intensive on these technologies. It will not be lowest cost out of the gate. So how do you incentivize the farmers to grow the crops in the most sustainable manner? The processors like a Cargill and ADM and others to process it in a very, sort of secluded manner or way that's more sustainable, and all the way out. So there's got to be money through that supply chain in the end. And we believe that carbon certainly is part of that.
Lisa, if I can address the last point of your question, which is what makes Minnesota unique. I'm excited because Minnesota lays at this interesting crossroad where we have the people, the ideas, and the resources that are perfectly suiting us for leading this bioeconomy revolution. From a people perspective, the Upper Midwest has a history of manufacturing workforce. We have a young and highly trained workforce here in the Twin Cities, great colleges and universities. From an innovation standpoint, your office, the Office of Technology Commercialization here, knows this better than any, that the faculty at the University of Minnesota and Mayo have been innovating in areas of genome engineering, recombinant synthetic biology for decades. And so we have a lot of thought leaders. But then from the resources point of view, if you're going to have a petrochemical based ecosystem, you put the refineries where the oil fields are. If you're going to have a bioeconomy, you need to put the biomanufacturing facilities where the feedstocks are. The Twin Cities exists where it does today because we're in the heartland of the most productive agricultural region of the world. And the river system was used to connect that agricultural production region to the rest of the world. So it makes sense that for a bioeconomy that's going to be based on those same feedstocks, the agricultural renewable resources, to do the manufacturing here in the upper Midwest.
Mike Sadowski, do you have anything to add to the discussion on this question?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I agree with the previous comments. Just like also add that to Dr. Szymanski's discussion, that not only are we at the crossroads where we have the intersection of a large amount of feedstocks coming into the city, but we also have a distribution hub to move those engineered and manufactured materials out of the Twin Cities as well. And in addition to what Michael Szymanski just mentioned, we also have some resources at the university which are relatively unique and allow people to test their ideas, as I mentioned, under real world conditions.
I'll just chime in again, but to go after again what Mike Szymanski said around and again where he's the CTO, BioMade is a big part of that. And so the fact that the University of Minnesota could get in that collaboration and really help build that along with the BRC, this is a huge skill gap in the industry, and it is one that is very timely. It's a really great time right now to be building that facility and starting that sort of convening of joint ideas and collaboration. So I think that is truly key.
And I'll just reiterate again, I'm on the East Bank campus right now, and if I look out the window, I can see the mill district, right? And there's a reason why Cargill is headquartered in Minnesota, and General Mills and Pillsbury were here. If you think of what those companies were doing, they're processing renewable feedstocks and producing materials to sell to the world. What's exciting about the bioeconomy is the types of materials, the types of chemicals that we can produce are, the number is expanding. It's no longer just milled flour or food ingredients, feed ingredients, but now we can start milling those same feedstocks, bioengineering organisms to convert those feedstocks to a diverse array of biofuels, bioplastics, commodity chemicals, everything that we use and interact with in our daily lives.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask one more question, and it's going to lead well into a couple questions that we've gotten from the audience so far. So what changes in biomanufacturing and biotechnology do you believe are needed to evolve and grow the entire value chain? Go ahead, Pam. You're on mute again.
It's really important that I'm on mute in between because of my dog with me. The barking will drive us all crazy. So, I wanted to respond also to the issue of how great Minnesota is. I'm here because I think Minnesota is really great, and I'm hoping we get to talking about the risks. And I would like to bring up one as it relates to manufacturing. So remember that every foray into the bioeconomy, from 1975 forward, resulted in this lack of inspiration to actually fund the bioeconomy until it could fund itself. And so in some ways, the circular potential that Jill brought up about the way we can use biology to live better, whatever that means, and it requires we define living better, is really, they're really, really important. But the products of the bioeconomy are biologically inspired, they're renewable, sustainable, and environmental friendly. But as Jill pointed out, they're judged by cost, price, and availability. So we're in a really unique situation in the world today. And part of it's been accelerated due to COVID. And we have to change the drivers in our economy. We need to change our manufacturing to meet this pull type of economy where you're aggregating sources, you do fast manufacturing, you do GMP manufacturing. And it means we need to get better at co-efficiencies and remodel our current processes to reduce the cost of change. So when you're switching to a different kind of manufacturing, there's a huge cost for change. And so I think it's really important to fundamentally understand the difference between where we're at in manufacturing right now and what are the different components we have to put together to move to the global strategy for manufacturing that's needed for the bioeconomy. And that's integration, aggregation of sources, collaboration. I mean, I can't stress that enough. I mean, if Minnesota could simply show the world how to collaborate, that would be a huge benefit in and of itself. So I just want to point out that in some ways our economy is against the standard manufacturing practices right now, and we have to think about that.
It's a super interesting point. Sorry, I'm just jumping in. It's a super interesting point, and it is one where what are the metrics, you know? And as a publicly or we're privately held, but as a for-profit company, yeah, you know, there is a monetary component there. But what's really interesting is that what we continue to focus on is how do you get paid for that sustainability, right? So that savings of greenhouse gases is worth a given value. So how do we start to understand that? And the one thing that we're like, again, you brought up risks. I think one of the risks that we have is, you know, sort of traditionally there's been a lot of greenwashing. So we've been really clear around, we are building up our capabilities to really do life cycle assessment inventories with partners and with others, and really making sure that our farmers have the right tool and we understand the total cost that carbon is coming from, right? Because it's great that it is in essence capturing the energy from the sunlight, but it also, you know, what else is it doing to the soil? How are we capturing that? How are we getting better? And farmers are truly innovative, and they continue to improve on water use and very much, you know, with all the drone technology and satellite technology, they can get very precision, you know, fertilization, et cetera. So they are continuing to improve. So how do we give them a score that allows them to be paid for that, right? So I definitely think there needs to be changes across the cycle, but there does need to be enough money in the system to pay people for the innovation and the effort. And that's one of those challenges. I want to just talk a little bit about, you know, the first part of the question, which is what are those things that are truly needed to, you know, to actually, you know, jumpstart. And again, I think BioMade answers quite a few of them in terms of we need to get faster at our innovation. And so from whether it's, you know, sort of lab scale, you know, high throughput screening and all the advances that happen there, but then the ability to jump into pilot and recognize, you know, sort of not having to pilot for 3-5 months to a year, but are you recognizing some things that say, I got to go back in the lab and then progress, you know, come back out here because this one won't work. So I think things like that from a BioMade perspective are fantastic because it's going to be a collaborative space. Now, everything that a Cargill would want to do in there, we're not going to open up obviously all that IP, but what are some of the general learnings that we can share as we're piloting? Oh, when it looks like that, we stop it because we won't go forward. How does that change the innovation pipeline and the actual execution time is truly important. We definitely need highly trained professionals as well as tradespeople. We made an announcement, we're building a renewable butane diol facility in Iowa. And it is very difficult to get all the tradespeople there. So what's all the skill levels? I love that we're getting these great, you know, undergraduate, PhD, master's candidates, all the rest, but we also need trades folks. How do we really encourage that? So it's really thinking about talent across the spectrum.
Lisa, I'd like to add a point to that if I could. And we've made great strides since the 1970s in the development of tools and technologies for genetic engineering. But I'd just like to say we're not quite there yet. And we're developing even better tools now that allow us to do coordinated expression of multiple genes in organisms to allow us to develop and utilize synthetic pathways much better. So while we need those tradespeople, while we need workforce development, we also need to train students and postdocs and so forth in basic understanding of molecular principles.
I'll riff on what Jill mentioned a little bit because she brought up Biomade, and I know I haven't gone into detail of what Biomade is. So just to paint a broad stroke picture, the way that products are brought to market is you tend to do research and development at small scales. So in my lab, we do really early stage research and development, and we might demonstrate a proof of concept in a 2-liter flask. Now, if I go to a corporate investor with a bioproduct in a 2-liter flask and I say, look, it worked, give me $100 million to build a massive facility in the Twin Cities somewhere, they're going to laugh at me. There's so much risk to go from that lab scale to the 200,000 liter scale. And that's what she mentioned as the piloting process, where we'll go from 2 liters to 50 liters to 500 liters. So the BRC that Mike leads does that pilot scale work. It's a contract manufacturing organization that can specialize in doing that intermediate scale to de-risk a technology. And we need more facilities like that. So, I mean, Mike can tell you how busy they are, how many companies are knocking on their door to use their pilot scale facilities. Our country needs more of that pilot scale facilities, and we need to accelerate the pace that we go from that research proof of concept all the way up to like demonstrating that it works at an intermediate scale, so that the corporate investors will say, oh yeah, we'll lend you the $100 million because we're confident it's going to work when you build your 200,000 liter fermenter.
Right. So we have a really great question from the audience, and it really talks around the theme of how do you cross the valley of death? And I know that all of you know what I'm referring to, and sort of how do you move from basic science to an actual commercialized product? So the person's question says, to the point of funding, many innovations in the bioeconomy benefit from decades of basic research in biology. However, many companies benefiting from this knowledge really are only interested in financially funding late stage product development. How do we shift the structure of policy and or the science to deal with this discrepancy of the funding for the basic science and the funding for late stage, but not enough in the middle? Go ahead, Pam.
Welcome to my world. So, there's been a lot of talk about corporate investors. I think Jill Cargill is probably this amazing corporate investor, but one thing that you have to face is that there are venture investors, and it's a whole nother industry. It's a whole nother world. And Michael Spansky, when you said nobody's going to give you $100 million to build something that's really big, these venture investors will give somebody $100 million to take your idea. They'll give somebody who's had the experience, who's been a CEO, who's raised money before, who's built a large, successful program. And so somehow the university has to insert alongside corporate investors and the corporate use. I think, Jill, was it you who said, yeah, we're not going to give away our IP? Well, universities should be selling their IP to people with experience that can cross the valley of death with venture funding and carry that to a partnership, a corporate partnership, and take the ideas from the university, all the way to commercialization. And I think that one of the things that I see, I saw that at Stanford, I saw it at the University of Minnesota, is that there's a lack of trust between the people, the inventors, and the people that are taking that invention to the market, or not simply de-risking it, but actually driving it in the direction of a product. Sometimes it's because it's a product maybe the inventor didn't think about, but that group of people needs to be inserted in order to cross the valley of death. And you have to maybe not train them, but you absolutely have to identify them in your area if you want to keep the whole value chain in your area. In the biopharmaceutical space, we do not keep the entire value chain in one area. We keep the funding in one area and we do the manufacturing elsewhere because it's important to demonstrate global distribution. So I think there's ways to do that, but it's got to be sort of a cultural change.
I also think that, again, I'm going to keep touting on Biomade, but it is one of those tools, right? If you have, it's very difficult, even for a large company like Cargill, to invest in all the infrastructure that we need to be able to pilot at any given moment, right? And so having some common infrastructure and supported infrastructure and people that are operating it that know, that actually know how to scale up is really key. Because many, if I think about it from a startup perspective, many startups, you're pulling together a team, and a lot of times they're from, many times at least the first round of the team that's just trying to pilot, they're research scientists. They may not be from an industrial space. And so really, being able to work with Mike Sadowski and Mike Szymanski on it are really key things for the BRC and the Biomade. I also believe there's a need for even larger facility that really could be your first commercial, multiple ton quantities that you could produce, whether it's to help customers meet the various specifications and the time that they need to adopt your new innovation. Or again, if you're a small startup, maybe you do the first year's worth of sales in a campaign there while you're getting your funding to actually build your actual commercial facility. So I do think common infrastructure that allows a wide variety of people to come in and learn how to pilot, learn how to process, and then scale it up, I think is really critical and can help.
No, and Jill, I am not disagreeing with that. A pilot level is crucial, but what I'm saying is, in terms of the question of the valley of death, sometimes it's not enough. And I think there is a huge trend now in developing CDMOs. So in other words, they're scaled up contract research and development, 350,000 square foot, places where you can get all this done. And I think that is the bridge. And in general, that is often venture funded.
Yeah, completely agree.
I want to interject a little bit to say first, Jill, keep singing the praises of Biomade. Biomade is a membership organization. It's only going to succeed on the strength of its members, like Cargill and the University of Minnesota. The professor in me realizes that, well, we all know what the Valley of Death is. Maybe not all 64 participants do. So I'm just going to do a little bit of explanation what we mean with this jargon. If you were to map out the commercialization process going from like the left side of your screen to the right, there's a lot of investment in the early stage R&D. That's investment that goes to startups and maybe even to university labs to do the first proof of concept. And then there's a lot of investment at the corporate level too, once a process has been sufficiently de-risked. But linking those two, that's the valley. Taking your promising, best invention since sliced bread and getting it to the point where you're selling it to millions of people. I think there's two things that we need. We need to inject funding in that area to pay for the science and engineering and development that needs to go from proof of concept to commercial product. But also, a lot of money with no map is a recipe for disaster. And so we need a map too, so that new companies can navigate through that valley of death and not make the same mistakes that others before them have made. And I think that that's one of the things I'm most excited about in Biomade. It's informing the bridges between companies like Cargill and an innovative new startup company where Cargill has brought dozens of products to market. They know the path well. And so having those big companies shepherd the new startups through that valley of death to bring more products to commercial potential is what I think Biomade offers.
That was a really vibrant discussion. I'm going to sort of shift topics just a little bit. So there was a mention of talent and the importance of talent, not only having PhDs or master's degree students, but also having trades workers and such. There's a question from our audience. What skills do you think students need to develop at the undergraduate level in order to enter the bioeconomy workforce and be adequately prepared?
Maybe I can tackle that first, if you don't mind. So one thing that we've been concentrating on is workforce development beginning at the undergraduate years. And it's in many ways a move away from only giving basic science courses to students to also have some practical science courses in biomanufacturing. Not to say that the basic materials aren't needed, but it needs to be coupled with some more applied manufacturing skills that many of the companies around the world are asking for these days.
Lisa, am I on mute?
No.
No.
Great. So I just want to tell you guys about an internship program that we ran at BioEclipse this summer, and we took people, at various stages in their undergraduate and brought them in and taught them our manufacturing process. And one of the things that I just want to say, the standout stars were those that understood biology, had great speaking skills, could write, and were just filled with this curiosity. So they could gather together all of those really important communication skills, to listen to the entire process and what was important, to bring their biology skills to bear on it, and then to go out and explain to people what they knew and what they understood. And I'm happy to say that we've had, 2 interns that one I hired and one went off to graduate school. One of my research associates went off to graduate school, and we brought in a new crop. And they're very, very productive because they're very engaged in communication. So I just wanted to make a plug for basic biology, being able to listen and be taught, and communication skills.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And I would add maybe 2 that we think about. One is systems thinking, which again, Pamela, I think it's very much in line with that, being super curious about, wait a minute, as we make choices or decisions, what are the intended and unintended consequences? So really stepping back and thinking about a system. The bioeconomy is a really big, giant system. And again, for us to succeed, we have to understand both unintended as well as intended consequences of our choices.
Jill, our bodies are big, complicated systems. Biology is way more complicated than our economy. And so when you merge the 2 together, I mean, it's all systems.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Lisa, I'll add in that I can't see who asked the question. I'm hopeful that it was an undergraduate, because that makes me really excited. And the first thing I would say is you should tell all of your other friends too how exciting biomanufacturing is, because we need you. We know we're going to need a big and diverse workforce. It's not going to be just one type of student that we need in the workforce. We're going to need chemical engineers, biologists, we're going to need economists, all types of people. And so part of BioMade, we have a whole operations unit focusing on education and workforce development, not only training the next batch of students, but also retraining people that maybe have jobs in existing manufacturing technologies, retraining veterans, et cetera. So we're going to need a large and diverse workforce. You can probably interact with the bioeconomy regardless of what your talents are, but definitely need, I'll also use this as an opportunity to give an advertisement for a new biotechnology major and or minor that the College of Biological Sciences is currently developing, and is available either now or in the next semester or 2 for you young and ambitious students to take.
Great. So we just have a few minutes remaining, and I want to give each of the panelists an opportunity to share kind of one final nugget. And so in our conversation, we talked about what bioeconomy is and what biotechnology is. We talked about innovation and some of the challenges of moving from basic research to a commercial product. We also touched upon workforce and talent. And so I'll start with Jill, because you're on the left side of my screen, and I'll let you kind of give the audience your parting nugget of information.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. This has been great and great to exchange on these ideas. I am very excited about this whole space and the bioeconomy. I feel like I got into my life choice. So I have a PhD in microbial fermentation, and then have, kind of stayed at Cargill since then. And really, the time is now. Like, there's never been a better sort of culmination of events and things. And so this time, I actually believe we will make it, we will connect and add jobs into rural communities through our farm systems, through our biorefineries and others. And it's such a great time to, as Pamela said, how do we collaborate in really unique fashions to actually make this real? And I believe we will get this done as we approach this going forward. Very excited.
Right. And Mike Sadowski.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. And I also strongly feel that this new bioeconomy allows integration of knowledge across vast distances of educational content, such as the engineers mixing with the biologists, mixing with the genetic engineers and so forth. And together with practical knowledge and workforce development, people are going to be primed for moving in this very exciting area in the not too distant future.
Mike Szymanski.
So most things that are worth doing are hard to do. The bioeconomy isn't going to make itself. It requires everyone to buy in. And so we need you guys to spread the word. We need you students to get engaged. There's a lot of problems to solve still, right? We need people, brains working on those problems. So I'm really excited about it. I think the more people we can get on board, it's going to be an exciting ride.
And then Pam. Turn off the mute.
Thanks. So I'm reading a book right now called Sapiens. And one of the things that really struck me is that there's a name for a brain process that relates to envisioning something you've never thought you needed or seen. And it's called ideation. So it's both innovation and invention. So one of the things that I love about universities is their think tanks, their experimenters. They can model natural cycles. They can do all of that ideation right then and there. And I think that it's really, really important that there's an all-out call to students to come in. Jobs in the bioeconomy can be very, very exciting. And you can do it across a whole range of training, from industry to academics. There's operating officers, bioengineering, scientists, all participating in this thing we call manufacturing. And I think that there are things ahead that are going to challenge us. As Michael Szymanski said, it's not all easy. There's going to be a new type of economy, new type of a new type of thinking about what you're going to manufacture next. And I really think that the heart of the university is for society. And those are the kind of issues that we need to tackle. And those are the kind of issues that across the board, funders, whether it's government, venture investors, corporations, those are the kind of things, that high unmet need that people are going to want to fund. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all expands.
Right. Well, thank you to our wonderful panelists for a really engaging discussion. We are out of time, unfortunately, but I do want to let everybody know that a recording will be available, and we'll send out a survey afterwards as well. So you have a chance to indicate if you'd like to stay connected with us to hear more about the developments at the university around the bioeconomy and biotechnology.
Thank you, everybody. That was a
Bye,
fantastic
everybody.
discussion. Thank you.